Welcome to Just Travel with Sandy. Hey everybody, I'm Sandy, your guide to stress-free and exciting travel. And this podcast is all about turning your travel dreams into reality, whether it's dealing with the overwhelm of planning a trip, overcoming travel anxiety, handling language barriers. I speak German, so you don't have to in case we go to German-speaking countries, and embracing new cultures with confidence, or absolutely anything in between. We also talk about practical travel tips to help you navigate new destinations with ease. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting out, this is your space to gain the mindset and tools to explore the world with joy. And I have super exciting news. Sandy's Travel Lounge is coming soon. It's going to be a fun, welcoming community for like-minded travelers. So get ready for events, laughter, expert advice, curated itineraries, and all things travel. So stay tuned. And I want to introduce you today. I'm super excited. We had a great conversation. It's been a couple weeks now with Bambi Lynn. She's a speaker, she's an author, and I would call her an expert on traveling with kids. So Bambi's children.
Yep, I have 6 adult children and 13 grandchildren. Yeah.
And that's amazing. So, and you said people ask you about your name, and I asked you about your name. So tell us a little bit about, and I see your face. So tell us a little bit about your name, where it came from, and we'll move on from that.
Yeah, we might as well just deal with the elephant in the room. So yeah, my real name is Bambi. No, it's not a made-up name. And everybody has, women think of my name as this cute little Disney. Men think of my name as this cute little dancer. So I was bullied and I had to work through my name. And when I was about 32 years old, we're going to do the short version. I went to the beach and got mad at God and asked God, why in the world did he name me Bambi? I gave him an ultimatum and I went to the bookstore and I told him that if my name was not in the book, inside of a book of the meaning of my name, that I was going to change my name to Janet. So I took all the books off of the name books, off of the shelf, and I'm sitting there at the table. I wrote my name in black and white, Bambi Lynn. The first book, my name wasn't in there. The second time I saw my name for the very first time written and a meaning of my name. And I was going to change my name to Janet because I don't know. I just like the name Janet. I knew it was about $800 to change my name. But when I saw that name and I saw the meaning of my name, I knew that there was not a mistake what I had gone through. And it was not a mistake of why I was named my name, because my name means holy child. So I ended it there. I just walked. Then I started knowing and believing that it didn't matter what the world says my name was. And it didn't matter how the world looked at me, but it just mattered how God looked at me. And he looked at me as his holy child. So that is the short version of my name, because we're here to talk about travel, which is one of my favorite things. But we might as well get the elephant out of the room.
Absolutely. I love it, though. I love it. And you're right. You think of Bambi, you think of Bambi. But I love that. That's beautiful. So maybe your mother or your parents knew more about it than you thought you did. So tell me a little bit about, you said you've taken your grandkids, is it, on all these little road trips? Talk about that and the ages and how you maneuver that and how you keep it fun and how you keep them entertained. And you've done mostly America travel, right? So road trips, is that correct?
I did go on my very first cruise this past January. I spent New Year's in the Caribbean. So that was my very first time ever doing something like that outside of the country, so to speak, except for Canada, because I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and Canada is 20 minutes from me.
Right.
Yeah, I grew up near Niagara Falls. So so I have done I have 7 more states to travel within the United States before I start wanting to go to a venture outside of the States. I guess I want to give my country the benefit of the doubt first and travel all of the states first.
Absolutely. So have your grandkids been on some of the trips with you in America?
Oh my goodness. That is the best thing in the world, is if you have grandchildren and their parents allow you to have your grandchildren. That is the most amazing thing that you can do for your grandchildren. Stop buying them the toys. Stop buying them the things from Five Below. Stop having these great big Christmases because you're a nana and you want to do something spectacular. because the parents, it's either going to break or the parents are going to sell it at yard sales. Give your grandchildren experiences instead of toys that they can throw away.
Tell me a little bit about what you mentioned that you've been all over with them, but just talk a little bit about some of your favorite trips that you've taken and how do you make it stress free? And of course, it depends on the age of the child too.
It does depend on the age. And you know what? I have this motto: when you're on vacation, it is an adventure, and let's keep the stress left behind. And it really
I love it.
depends on how you are as an individual. When I'm in a car, even when I've gone on vacation with my grandchildren and like my daughter, I look at her immediately because she's more of a stressful person. And I'm like, this is vacation. We're not yelling. We're if they want something, we're giving it to them. Everything is about the grandchildren to build those memories. So I would say some of my favorite is that I took which now he's going to be 14 years old. So this was 2 years ago. I took my oldest grandchild to Mount Rushmore, and we traveled from Georgia all the way to Mount Rushmore in a car.
Oh, wow.
So we stopped along the way. We stopped in Nashville. We stayed in Nashville for a day. And then we went to St. Louis and stayed in St. Louis for 2 days. And we just kept traveling until we got to South Dakota. And it was the most amazing trip. And even he says today, Nana, that was my favorite all-time thing that I ever did. He'd always wanted to go to Mount Rushmore. And so I said, let's do it. I personally don't like flying a whole lot when I'm in the United States because there's so much to see along the roads in the United States. So for me to have the privilege to be able to take my grandson to South Dakota, and then we realized that we were only 30 minutes away from Wyoming. And so we had to go do something in Wyoming. I don't count a state unless I have done something in that state. So he was my first, and we went to there.
So how do you from Georgia to Mount Rushmore? That's a haul. So, and obviously you stop, but how did you keep him entertained, for lack of better terms, in the car? Like, you play games, or does he sleep? Like, I'd be asleep.
Yes, he did some of that. The deal is that if we were traveling long distances, he would be able to be on his phone for long distances, because at the time he was 12 years old, he was able to do that. But if we were only going to short distances, like 2 hours or below, then we had to have conversations. So we would play games. We would rap together. We would make up our own songs together. We would make up our own stories. I would start off a story, and then he would add to it, and then I would continue to add to it. It was my opportunity to be able to get to know my grandson a whole lot better and to see how he ticks, kind of thing.
That's awesome. So you really created some beautiful memories. That's a good age too, because they're not too little. So I love that. And you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say one thing that was really funny about South Dakota is his phone didn't work a lot. And so we had gone to this bear adventure that you could drive through and see bears, and bears would be jumping on your car and stuff like that. And we were driving through, and then we went on this hill, and he said, Nana, stop. And I'm like, what? So I pulled out on the side of the road. He goes, this is the best internet I have had the whole entire trip. So that was
That's
just such
funny.
a funny thing, because I can't believe it. Stay on this hill for a little while. So that was really cool. And we got to go on a trip to go see buffalo, go and eat on what do they call them? Not a wagon train. It wasn't a wagon train, but we got to go and eat meals along the path to see buffalo. It was just such an amazing time. And then when we went into, it was either Montana or Wyoming, but they have the Devil's Rock, and we didn't know, but I knew that I wanted to go to that state. So we actually walked the 2.5 miles around the rock and didn't know it was there. So we weren't prepared. So we're walking in sandals and Crocs and flip-flops and seeing snakes taken off and stuff like that. That was a memory that he definitely thought, Nana, we should have totally had our sneakers.
That's awesome. I love the memories you're creating. So when we talked, and I found this fascinating, that before you go somewhere, you find out something unique, weird, different to do. So
Yes.
what prompted that idea? And
it's actually Because I worked for Nielsen TV ratings, and I actually traveled around the country for them. So my daughter was homeschooling my grandchildren. And so I said to her, I told my grandson, I said, wherever Nana is, I want you to look up 2 things that you would like Nana to do on that. So that's how it started. Find 2 weird things, Google it, and just say weird things to see in Vermont, weird things to see in Austin, Texas. And I would pick things that he would have me do. So I was in Vermont, and he picked to go see the tallest filing cabinet. It's in Vermont. It's 25 filing cabinets up. It is the rustiest thing that you ever want to see. It's been there forever, but that was a weird thing to do in Vermont. Another weird thing to do in Vermont is that there was a cemetery that people, their cemetery stones were like cool different plots. Like one of them was a race car. One of them was a huge soccer ball. Another one site was a husband and wife laying in bed. So that was the other cool thing. My grandson's like, Nana, you got to go to the cemetery to see these cool grave sites, these stones. I did that. Austin there was a museum, Everything Weird, and Austin, Texas is known for that. Everything weird happens in Austin. And there was a guy that he was a little, I don't know what to say, but he was a little short man, but he had been electrocuted a couple times. So he has electricity in his body. So if you touch him and you have a light bulb, the light bulb turns on. It was the weirdest thing, but my grandson tells me where to go. And so I would go do it.
That's awesome. And this was all on the same trip?
Just different trips that we have taken.
Different trips. That's true, because Vermont, that wouldn't make sense. Yeah. So have you traveled with any other grandchildren, or mainly this particular grandson?
No, I usually try to travel one-on-one, but some of them I've traveled 2 by 2 because if they are from the same family. One time with 2 of my grandsons that are my son's kids, we went to Kentucky and we stayed in there's only 2 left in the country. There's one in Arizona and one in Kentucky. And those are teepees that are made out of cement. And we stayed within the teepees. And actually Eleanor Roosevelt stopped and stayed at the one that we stayed at in Kentucky. My grandchildren thought that was the coolest thing, that they got to stay 2 days inside of a teepee that was concrete. And at night you would sit around and talk to people and build and have s'mores and stuff like that. So that was a really cool thing that we did. Another grandchild, we were on our way to Colorado, and I had spent 2 years trying to go through all of the homesteads of Laura Ingalls Wilder. So he came with me with the last homestead, which was in Kansas. So we went to that, and then we drove through Kansas and we did everything. We looked up everything we could about the Yellow Brick Road, because there's no place like home in Kansas. And that's where the Wizard of Oz was not filmed, but that's where it was talked about, was no place of Kansas. And we traveled to all the spots that we could to find everything to do with the Yellow Brick Road. And then we ended up into Colorado to go to Pikes Peak.
Oh, that's amazing. And so do you research before, or do you just wing it and just drive, or a little bit of both?
We researched it a little bit, things that they would like to do. My grandson, my daughter, I didn't raise my children with Santa Claus, but my daughter did. One of my daughters did. And she wanted her son to have at least one more year believing in the Santa Claus and believing in the elf. So Santa Claus actually has an amusement park in Colorado, and they say that is his summer home. Oh, that was the purpose, is to be able to take him to see Santa Claus in his summer home. And so my daughter could get one more year with him believing in Santa Claus.
Where in Colorado is that?
It's near Pikes Peak.
Okay. I know where. Yeah, I have a lot of friends in Colorado, in Denver and Colorado Springs and that area. Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I'll have to ask my friend who lives in Colorado Springs about that. That's too funny.
Yeah, that was really cool. When my kids were little, I did homeschool. And so when we would do something, when we would do a project, I would then research on different ideas that we could do so they could get the hands-on experience. So we did the Oregon Trail, studied the Oregon Trail. And in my community where we lived, there was every summer, there was a covered wagon ride that people could go on. You can go on it. It was for like 9 days, or you can break it up. My children and I did it for 3 nights and 4 days. And that's why I tell my children when we're on vacation, my grandchildren, it's stress-free, because I learned on that trip, because it poured the whole entire time we were there. It was rainy, it was muddy, we had to stay in tents, and we ate in Amish field communities. And so they would set up in their fields, they would set up our food and everything. So we would have to go through this trail, and the trail was muddy, it was full of horse crap and everything, and we had to walk through it. Well, at that time, I didn't know what the trip was going to be, and I didn't know it was going to rain the whole entire. And I realized at that moment, as I'm standing in mud, as a parent, you could either make or break any vacation. You change the atmosphere of vacations. And so I looked at my 2 boys that were 8 years old, I think. I looked at them, I said, boys, take off your shoes and socks. We're walking through this. We're walking through all of this barefoot. Now, I could have said, you know what, pack up the tent, get out of here. I'm not walking through this. I'm not doing this. But instead, I made that split-second decision that I knew that I could create a good atmosphere for my children, and plus now for my grandchildren. So for 2.5 days, we walked through horse crap and mud and rain, but it was the best vacation. It's the vacation that they talk about all the time when we're together for Thanksgiving and Christmas. It was a life changer to me, because I've seen parents on vacation. I've seen how stressful it can be. But when you make a decision in your mind and you make a decision at that very moment, everything changes, and it just becomes something that someday they're going to be able to talk about and laugh about.
It's all about perspective, right? It's all about perspective and finding something good and something bad mindset. And it's a good lesson to teach children too, right? I always say there's always something good and something bad, and make of it and have fun in what it is. I'm an equestrian, so walking through horse poop doesn't bother me at all. I've been there, done that.
It was the best.
That's awesome.
It was the best pedicure I've ever received in my whole entire life. I had the softest feet. And then it just reminds you, I tell people, because I am a speaker and I am a storyteller, and I tell people, you know what? It just shows you that shit happens, and it's what you're going to do with it.
Yep, exactly. Literally. Literally. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about, you just touched on it, you're a storyteller. I know you're an author. So what do you write about?
My first book was The Journey of Josephine, which was my memoir of the trauma and the things that I had been through throughout my life, and how I was a broken little girl that has been transformed into somebody that my trauma is not my death sentence. The trauma in my life doesn't have to define me. I have to deal with it. I have to forgive it. I have to move on. But then it becomes something that I can bring to others, that it's like my story is your first aid kit. It's something that was given to me so that you could be brave enough and courageous enough to tell your own story. Then I wrote this story. Then I wrote a book called The Treasures of My Heart, which are the gifts and the things that happen to you in the midst of the storms. Sometimes we get so caught up in our storms that we forget that there are treasures that have taken place. When my sons left for the military, they were the last to leave. And it was devastating to me. It was like, I was not prepared for this empty nest thing. As a single mom, was not prepared for it. But then God gave me a job that I was able to travel all across the country. And there were times that I was able to go see one of my sons that was stationed in California that I would have never been able to see if I didn't have the job that I had. So it's finding those treasures in the midst of all the storms. And so I am so thankful for the last 18 years that I spent with Nielsen and with the Census Bureau, traveling and meeting people that I would never have met, that it really helped me to overcome and to deal with the empty nest. And I went so many different places that I thought that, I don't know, for some reason I thought, oh yeah, people go there. I went to the Field of Dreams in Iowa, which was amazing, where they did this story with Kevin Costner. Went to the largest truck stop. It's going to places that I thought everybody knows about. And I realized that no, we live such a confined life that so many of us only do certain things. I don't take my grandchildren to Disney. I've been to Disneyland and to Disney World. To me, for me personally, those experiences are not, if the parents want to do that's fine. I want to take my grandchildren on adventures that they'll never going to experience again. And
So it's those off the beaten track things. That's what my trips that I offer that we go on. Like we went to an off the beaten track trip in Germany last year. We're going to Ireland in June, and I'm planning one to France in September, and it's all off the beaten track. So we're going to Paris, but we're not going to the Tour Eiffel. We're not going to Montmartre, Sacré-Cœur. It's going to be totally off the beaten track, the Paris that you don't know. So I love that you do
yeah,
that because Disney, I've been to Disney multiple times because I used to live in Jacksonville, Florida. When I left
okay,
Germany to come to America, we lived in Jacksonville, and every field trip that the kids' school took was to Disney. So it
yeah,
was just by default. But there's so much more out there, right, than Disney. And
absolutely.
yeah, people want to do it, that's fine, but it wouldn't be my first choice either. So
It's
I
not
can
my first
totally, yeah,
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 it's just not my first
absolutely.
choice. I remember, years ago when my kids were young, and at the time I had a Verizon cell phone, but you had to pay to get GPS on it. You, like, had to pay $10 a month to get the GPS on it. The GPS didn't work during going through the hills of Kentucky, and we were on our way to Mammoth Caves. And for some reason, the GPS didn't work. So then I saw this other thing that said Jesse James Campground. And I'm like, boys, I don't know how to get anywhere. I don't know how to get where we're supposed to go. Let's go there. And it was the best thing. My boys went on their first horseback ride through the woods and up the mountains. We stayed in a cabin.
Spontaneous.
It was so spontaneous. And that's also the other thing that I do. I do have plans when we travel, but then we have days that we set aside to look for the things within the community. The other thing that I do with my grandchildren when we go out is that they have to eat something that they would have never eaten. It doesn't have to be every meal, but on the trip, they have to at least pick one thing that they've never eaten before. And that starts conversations. Sometimes I got to
Right.
pay them. Sometimes I say, hey, I'll give you $10 or do that. But you know what?
Right.
It's worth it.
I love that. That's awesome. I love that you are spontaneous. I love that you do off the beaten track things and just keep it fun and lighthearted. And just before we wrap it up, what lessons has travel taught you? Lessons from the road, basically. I feel like I'm obviously a huge traveler, and I feel like every journey teaches me something and expands my capacity and expands my mindset. So, what is the lesson, or what lessons, or what has travel taught you?
Oh my goodness. Travel has taught me pretty much that this world is really big. And you know what? We think we live on this little island. But when you go out and you hear other people's stories, I've sat with people that are sitting by themselves and I've asked, hey, I'm vacationing by myself. Would you mind me sitting with you? And the conversations that you can have with people, the realizing the breath of fresh air. When you decide to do something different, experiences create who we are. They create stories. They help you to become a storyteller because you can take a story that you have been through, you can take a travel and a situation that you have been through, and you can come up with a story to tell a story of a life lesson. I think that
Yeah.
traveling gives you life lessons. It gives you those opportunities to embrace, who you are, who you were created to be, and what you were created to do. And some of traveling does that for you. There's just something about getting into the car, and my kids get upset with me because if I'm heading someplace, unless I'm with my grandchildren, we've already planned it. But if I'm heading someplace, I sleep at the rest stops. I don't stop at a hotel because then I'm going to sit around at the hotel and drink my coffee and take forever. But if I sleep at a rest stop that is now lighted and they have security guards and everybody else is sound asleep, then I immediately get going. I sleep for a couple hours and then I get going to get to my destination. And some of those have been the best sleeps. I'm not scared. When it teaches
Right.
you to be brave, when you're by
Yep.
yourself, it teaches you, hey, can you take a picture of me and I'll take a picture of you on the
Hmm.
conversation, on things like that.
I love that.
Look for adventures. It's worth the time. And sometimes you don't have to spend as much as you think you have to spend to get there.
Absolutely agree with you. A lot of people would travel, and I can understand, but they get too attached to the expense. But For me, travel, what it gives back, and you can do it. You can do it on a budget and you can
Yes.
explore the world, definitely. So that I always tell people, don't let that stop you because the world is so big and there's so
Yes.
much to see. And like you said, in America or wherever that it is that you choose to go. So I love, love, love that.
The other thing that I tell people is that because when we go someplace, we always seem to say, oh my goodness, I want to come back here. I want to come back here. You're trying to create the adventure that you had, and you're not going to get the same thing again. So, my recommendation, go someplace else. Go someplace
Hmm.
else and build those memories someplace else. Don't keep going to the same spot because you're trying to create what it gave to you the first time and you
Right.
don't get that. And then you walk away disappointed a little bit, going, oh, that's not what I expected.
Because it's the memory that you're attached to, not the
Absolutely.
actual. Absolutely. I 100% can agree with that. And I have been back to places that I love, but only because I'm an art buff and a history buff, and I haven't been able, like in Italy, for example, and haven't been able to see. And I know every experience is unique, but you're absolutely right. We can't be attached to the memory and to the experience because it is going to be different every single time.
And be
Absolutely.
okay. I just went on my very first cruise and people said, would you do it again? And I'm like, I don't know. And be okay with that. Be okay. Just because everybody around you thinks cruising is amazing doesn't mean you have to. I spent 5 days on the cruise and 36 hours of it sicker than a dog. So now I want to go to an all exclusive resort. Now I want to try
Hmm.
that, like on land. And I'm okay with not actually thinking that cruising was the best thing in the world. Just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean it's meant for you.
That's so funny because I actually spoke with somebody yesterday and I'm like, I I've been on 5 cruises by default and I don't ever want to have to go on, and I'm not at all a cruise fan. And that's just me. Nothing wrong with it, but I would much rather get lost in a city or a country. And that's just my personal choice. So you're absolutely right. Not everything is for everybody. That's why there are so many options out there and there are so many different things we can do. So,
Absolutely.
Bambi, before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you want to say in closing?
I just want to say, you know what? You only live once. Enjoy the journey because this is the only time you're going to get it. There's no more do overs. So enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. And if you have to go alone because you're really not alone, and enjoy the atmosphere that you create and make sure that as a mom and a dad, vacations are supposed to be fun. Stop taking the negativity and everything that you have in the house on vacation. This is supposed to be fun. You want your children someday to be sitting around their Thanksgiving table laughing at
I love
vacations.
that.
You don't want them sitting around the table going, I hated vacations.
I love that. So I will have Bambi's information in the show notes. Anybody that wants to look into her books or maybe even talk to her about coming and speaking on her adventures, you'll be able to get in touch with her. And I want to thank you for joining and for tuning in to Just Travel with Sandy. Hope this episode inspired you to take the next step towards travel dreams, regardless if it's with your kids, your grandkids, solo, or with the group. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, share. Please leave a review. It really means the world to me. And until next time, keep dreaming, planning, and exploring with confidence because travel for me is life, and I believe everybody really deserves to see what's out there and what the world has to offer. And don't forget to stay tuned for Sandy's Travel Lounge.